I never expected my quiet Thursday evening to take such a turn. The sun had just started dipping behind Theroftops, casting an amber glow over the neighborhood. I stood by the kitchen window watching the last streaks of daylight filter through the branches. Off the old oak tree, the house was still save for the rhythmic tick of the clock and the occasional creak of the wooden floor beneath my bare feet. Then the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting any. Living alone for the past few years had made me accustomed to solitude. My son was grown and busy with his own life, and my evenings were usually spent with a book or a glass of wine. Sometimes both. Curious, I made my way to the front door and peeked through the P. It was him, Daniel, my neighbor from across the street. We weren't exactly close, but we had exchanged pleasantries over the years. A wave here, a friendly nod. There was a man in his late 40s, always polite, always composed. There was a quiet air about him, something mysterious but never intrusive. I opened the door, my fingers tightening around the handle. Daniel, I said, surprised. He held a small box in his hands, wrapped neatly with a dark green ribbon. Hey, Claire, he said, offering to smile. I hope I'm not disturbing you not at all, I replied, though I could hear the hesitation in my own voice. What's this, a small gift? He said, his expression unreadable. Something I thought you might like, a gift from my neighbor. I hesitate for a moment, glancing at the box before looking back up at him. That's really kind of you. But why? I asked. He let out a soft chuckle. Just open it, you'll understand. There was something in his tone, a quiet insistence, a hint off something unspun. I took the box from his hands, feeling the weight of it, the smoothness of the paper beneath my fingertips. Thank you, Daniel. Would you like to come in for a moment? I asked, half out of politeness, half out of curiosity. He hesitated, then shook his head. Maybe. And I thought him enjoy the gift, Claire, and just like that he turned and walked back across the street, disappearing behind his front door. I stood there for a moment, my heart beating just a little faster than before. Inside, I placed the box on the kitchen counter, staring at it as if it might reveal its secrets on its own. Thereupon slid off easily, and as I lifted lid, my breath caught in my throat. Inside, nestled in soft black velvet, was a delicate silver bracelet with an intricate charm dangling from a tiny ornate key. But it wasn't just the bracelet that made my heart skip, it was the folded note beneath it. I picked it up with careful fingers, unfolding the crisp paper. There are things we don't say, but sometimes a small key can open a door whenever new is closed. If you're curious, meet me at the old cafe tomorrow at 7:00 p.m. And Daniel, a wave of emotion washed over me, curiosity, surprise, and something else, something deeper. I stared at the note, reading a tag in as if the words might change. This wasn't just a neighborly gesture. This was something goals, and for the first time in a long time, I found myself wondering what exactly had I overlooked all these years. I barely slept that night. Daniel's note sat on my nightstand, illuminated by the soft glow of my bedside lamp. I must have read it a dozen times, each word unraveling a new layer of meaning. Was this a simple invitation for coffee, or was there something more, something unspoken that had lingered between? Yes, all these years. By morning, Mimond was still restless, caught in a tug of war between curiosity and hesitation. I went about my routine as usual, brewing coffee, checking my emails, pretending that today was just another ordinary day. But the bracelet on nearest told a different story. It felt strangely intimate, the silver charm resting against my skin like a whisper. The tiny key dangled, delicately, an unspoken question hanging between us. By the time the clock neared 7, myself had hardened. I needed answers. The old cafe Daniel had mentioned wasn't far, just a few blocks away, tucked between a bookstore and a florist. It was the kind of place that had history, the wooden tables worn with time, the scent of fresh pastries lingering in the air. I stepped inside, the doorbell timidly, and there he was. Daniel sat at a corner table, dressed in a navy sweater, his hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee. When he saw me, he stood, his expression unreadable but warm. You came, he said, a small smile playing on his lips. I did, I replied, sliding into the seat across from him. Now, tell me, Daniel, what is this all about? For a moment he didn't answer, has simply studied me as if searching for something in my face. Then, with a quiet sigh, he leaned back, his fingers tracing the rim of his keep. Suppose I should start at the beginning, he said, but first, do you remember the house next to yours, the one that was sold last year? I frowned, caught off guard by the question. Of course, the old Richards place, he nodded. And do you remember the woman who used to live with her? A memory surfaced, an elderly woman always in her garden, waving as I walked past. Mrs. Richards had been a kind soul always, sharing stories about her late husband, about the love they had built within those four walls. Yes, I said slowly, she was a lovely laddie. Daniel exhaled, his gaze lowering for a moment. She was mild. The revelation hit me like a sudden gust of wind. Your aunt? He nodded. She and me mother were sisters after My mother passed. I didn't have a much family left except for her. She always spoke highly of you, Claire. She said you reminded her of herself when she was younger, kind, independentful. I blinked stunned. I had no idea she asked me to look after you, Hesed. His voice softer now, not in an overbearing way, but just to be there if you ever needed anything. But time passed and I never found the right way to reach out until now. I glanced down at the bracelet, the key, catching the dim light of the cave. The key, I mummed. What is it? Open. Daniel's lips curved slightly, but there was something wistful in his expression. It's a symbol, he said. My aunt is to say that everyone keeps doors locked inside. Then memories, feeling regrets, sometimes all we need. Is there a person to hand us that key? Something in my chest tightened. This wasn't about a physical door, it was about something deeper. You've been watching over me all this time, I whispered. Daniel met my gazeous own eyes filled with some thank you riddle. I guess you could say that. A warmth spread through me. Unexpected but not unwelcome. For years I had thought of myself as alone, navigating life with quiet resilience, but maybe, just maybe, I hadn't been as alone as I believed. Maybe without realizing it, Simeon had been waiting for me to find the key. All along I sat there, the weight of Daniel's sword settling over me like a warm ephemeral all these years. I had assumed I was moving through life on my own. I had learned to be independent, to rely on myself. And yet here was this man, someone I had only seen in passing, someone I had never truly let into my world, revealing that he had been quietly watching over, not out of obligation, but out of something deeper. I curled my fingers around the key on the bracelet, feeling the cool metal against my palm. Your aunt never told me any of this, if only, said my voice softer than before. Daniel took a slow sip of his coffee before replying. She didn't want you to feel watched. She always said you were strong, that you carried yourself with grace, but she also knew that event the strongest people need someone in their corner. I let his words sink in, something stirring in my chest, I said, forcing a small smile. Most people would have just knocked on my door and said, he on your neighbor, let's be friends. Daniel chuckled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Yeah, well, I guess I wanted it to tell me in something when I finally reached out. There was a pause, an unspoken understanding passing between us. So what? No, I asked. Daniel's expression grew thoughtful. That depends on you, Claire. This wasn't just about giving you a gift or telling you about my aunt. I wanted you to know that if you ever feel like opening a new door, I'd be on the other side. I felt my breath hitch slightly. Was this a confession, an invitation, or simply an offer of companionship? Maybe it was all three. The thought sent a shiver through me, not a fear, but possibility. For years I had convinced myself that my world was already set, that my story had been written, but maybe there were still pages left to turn, chapters waiting to be discovered. I looked at Daniel, really looked at him. The quiet confidence in his gaze, the kindness in his expression. Wasn't a stranger, not really. He had been there all along, lingering on the edges of my life, waiting for me to notice. Maybe it was time, maybe I was ready. I reached for my cup, taking a slow sip before meeting his gaze again. Tell me, Daniel, I said, my lips curving into a small smile. How do you feel about taking a walk with me? The warmth in his eyes deepened. I'd like that, he said, and just like that something shifted between you, subtle but undeniable. A door had opened, and for the first time in a long time, I was ready to step through. The evening air was crisp as Daniel and I stepped out off the cafe, the soft glow of street lights casting long shadows along the quiet sidewalk. The town had begun to wind down for the night, but for me it felt like something was just beginning. We walked in comfortable silence. At first, the sound of our footsteps blending with the distant hum of cars. I could feel the weight of the bracelet on my wrist, the tiny key swinging gently with each step. It was strange how a single moment, a single gift could unravel years of solitude and make me question everything I thought I knew about my own life. You seem deep in thought, Daniel said, glancing over at me. I smiled slightly. Guess I waited, giving me space to find my words. I've spent a long time convincing this that I didn't need anyone. I admitted that it was easier to be self-sufficient, to rely on myself, and for a while I thought that May was strong, but now I wonder if I was just afraid of letting someone in. Daniel didn't answer right away. He let the words linger in the air, respecting their weight. I understand that, he said. Finale, sometimes we build walls so high we forget why we put them up in the first place. I turned to him, studying the quiet sincerity in his face. What about y'all? Have you always been this patient, this helpful? A small chuckle escaped him. The Talways. I think life has a way of teaching us patience, whether we want to learn it or not. We reached the small part near Miss Street where the old wooden benches overall cooked a pond. The water reflected lights from nearby houses, rippling gently with the breeze. I sat down and Daniel followed. So what happens now? I asked, my voice softer. Now he leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. That's up to you, Claire. The way he said my name sent a quiet warmth through me. I don't know if I'm ready to change my whole life overnight, I admit it, but I do know that. I don't want to keep shutting people out, and I don't want to shut you out, Daniel. A slow smile spread across his face, not triumphant, not expectant, but something else, something genuine. Then we take it one step at a time, he said. I exhaled, feeling a strange sense of relief. That sounds good. For a while we just sat there, letting the night surround us. I watched the water, the way it reflected the sky above, endless open, full officeability, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like my own life could be same. A door had opened, and this time I wasn't afraid to walk through it.